Chapter 2, Dre, Lost in Thought. Tonight was the night that would change his life forever. This thought was on repeat in Dre's mind as he dragged his cart along the familiar, bumpy road, even though it was the last thing that he wanted to think about. It seemed odd to Dre that the day his life had been building up to since birth was here. It was a night that he had been looking forward to for almost as long as he could remember. That had changed over the past year, though. Dre wasn't sure when it began, but one day the excitement he felt about his class day had been tinged with anxiety. Since then, he had begun to dread it more and more every day. Had he done enough? Surely not. He was the talentless offspring of a successful tailor and a brilliant seamstress. His biggest accomplishments in life were carrying things from point A to point B. In years past, when he had been looking forward to this night, it was because of all the limitless possibilities it provided. Back then, his daydreams had always found him at the top of the mountain. Over the past year, though, an uncomfortable reality had set in. He didn't deserve the mountaintop. The entire idea of choosing a class seemed ridiculous to him. An adult, who has grown up just enough to not be considered a child, gets to make a decision that will impact the rest of their life? To make matters worse, everyone that Dre talked to about class selection said that the options one received were directly related to things one had done in their life. That was what made it so truly terrifying. No matter how much others tried to reassure him, Dre knew that he had accomplished next to nothing in the first 18 years of his life. At least, nothing worthy of any of the classes he had always dreamed of choosing. Dre had countless questions about classes, but there was one that frustrated him more than the rest. How exactly was the son of a tailor and a seamstress who grew up in a small town where nothing exciting happened supposed to accomplish heroic things? He hadn't had the opportunity to perform the incredible deeds necessary to be worthy of getting class options of noble warrior, knight, or the most legendary of all, hero. In his entire life, there had been no monster attacks, no bandit raids, no opportunities. Dre knew this whole line of thought was silly at best and misguided at worst. He had every reason to be thankful. A comfortable, peaceful life was more than anyone could ask for, wasn't it? It had to be too late to change his class options anyways. He doubted that a half day could outweigh the rest of his 18 years. Besides, did he really want to be a hero or an adventurer? Sure, it is what he and all the other children had always dreamed about, but the older he got, the more he questioned if it was something that he was cut out for. Adventurers were great fighters. They were quick thinkers, problem solvers. They were brave and, quite simply, awesome. Of course, he had never actually met an adventurer. He had seen a few groups pass through the town, though, and he had been able to quite easily glean these characteristics of them from across the street. He was none of those things. He could admit to himself, if pressed, that he was strong, but he had no training, so he had no idea how to take advantage of his strength in a fight. He definitely wasn't quick-witted or a problem solver. His parents had never said it to him, but Dre was convinced they thought of him as a simpleton. How could they think anything different after he had never managed to pick up tailoring to a satisfactory level? As for bravery, he liked to think he was, but where was the proof? He had never done a brave thing in his life. Dre had talked all this over with Asya. She had said all the right things, all the pleasant lies about him being very smart and strong and handsome, that she had seen his bravery many times, but Dre didn't believe her. He couldn't believe her, because if he did, then he might once again start thinking of her as more than just a friend. On top of everything else, what got under his skin was that he shouldn't even want to get those types of class options anymore. The others near his age seemed to have grown out of those dreams long ago. He should be hoping for something reasonable and practical, a class that would lead to a good life and a way to comfortably provide for his future family. He racked his brain for classes that he might qualify for. He had used a knife before. Maybe he would get an option to be a blacksmith. He wore leather boots every day. Maybe he could be a leather worker. Or, since all he did most days was deliver packages for his parents, he probably wouldn't even be given class choices. He would automatically be assigned the common laborer class. It was the outcome he most feared because it was the one he most expected. Over the past year, Dre had been incessantly pestering anyone willing to talk with questions about their class selection. What had it been like? How many options did they have? Why did they choose what they did? Would they choose differently if they could do it all again? Most people didn't remember all that much about their class selection, which absolutely flabbergasted Dre. He had managed to learn that about a quarter of them had been automatically assigned the common laborer class. He had met and talked to many of them. They were good people, but he wanted more. He wished he could say he deserved more. He couldn't. But still, he wanted more. Hello? A snooty voice broke Dre out of his spiraling thoughts. He looked up and realized that he had arrived at the location of his delivery. Had he really already traveled 3 miles? He barely remembered the journey at all. He really needed to listen to Asya and get out of his own head. Hello, anybody there? The same nasally voice said, with perhaps even more irritation coming through. It broke him out of his mental fugue, this time fully clearing the fog from Dre's mind. For the first time since he had started out on his delivery, he consciously acknowledged his physical surroundings. He was standing in front of an incredibly large home, only a step or two down from what he imagined a castle would look like. Its overall shape was generally rectangular, but every detail of it was rounded. All of the many windows had curved outcroppings, and there were 8 small spinnerets reaching into the sky. Each shone golden in the sunlight, a splash of color on the otherwise purely white facade. A rather gangly man with a pinched, angry face stood in the open doorway. He wore a uniform of rich purple accented with gold in such a way that Dre suspected he fancied himself more lord than servant. He looked down on Dre and, inconsequentially, looked down at Dre along a wide but short set of stairs. Dre had heard of the new butler that Lady Mariva had hired, but this was his first time in the man's disapproving presence. It turned out that the stories he had heard weren't exaggerated much, if at all. Sorry, sir. I just have a lot of things running through my head today, Dre said in a polite voice. I have a delivery for Lady Mariva from my mother, Seamstress Delane. Well, I highly doubt there's ever been a lot of anything happening in that head of yours, boy. But yes, my lady has been looking forward to this delivery, quite anxiously, I might add. I believe it was intended to be delivered last week, the man questioned, a self-righteous smirk sprouting on his scrunched-up face. Dre's face reddened in anger and embarrassment, but he chose to ignore the first comment. To the question, he responded, Yes, it was meant to be delivered last week, but the trimming lace arrived almost 2 weeks late from Raven. I swear on the Creator's hand that my mother has spent every waking moment to finish it for the lady as quickly as possible, but Dre swallowed and had to push the next words out. As I am sure a refined man like yourself knows, true quality can't be rushed. I personally handed a letter of explanation to the young woman who came to pick it up last week. She assured us that the lady would not be greatly inconvenienced by the delay. Yes, of course, although I have heard that suppliers' shipments are often late to your parents' store. What unfortunate luck they must have, he said, the knowing smirk still stuck on his face. He turned and walked briskly into the house. He only glanced at a footman who was standing just inside of the door, but the man immediately jumped into action. The footman was only a couple steps away when the butler raised his hand, and the footman, who was facing the opposite direction of him, stopped, a long-suffering expression on his weary face. The butler then moved his hand left and then right, and the footman stepped to the left and right, matching the motion of the butler, even though he couldn't see the man. After an uncomfortable amount of time had passed, the butler lowered his hand and the footman quickly grabbed the dresses. In a few moments, when he was closest to Dre, the footman whispered, Sorry, he shows off his commanding thought skill whenever he gets a chance. He gave a resigned shrug, but stiffened suddenly before finishing the motion. He turned and marched inside at a near run. When Dre looked up at the butler, he was slowly lowering his hand, a smirk clinging to his scrawny face. Dre tried and failed to keep his tone respectful, as he responded to the man's thinly veiled insult. My parents' store is well known for high quality and efficient work. Your mistress obviously knows that, or she would have ordered from elsewhere. Well, you are correct in assuming that my lady has marvelous taste. However, we are all only human, and she has been known to make mistakes in the past. So saying, the man turned and walked back inside the massive house, but he turned back once just inside the threshold. One thing that I'm sure of, though, is that if the seamstress Delane has a you for an offspring, she can't be all that impressive, he quipped, as he slammed the door in Dre's face. Dre just stood there for long moments, absolutely dumbstruck. Who knows how long he would have stayed like that if fear of the pompous butler hadn't motivated him to move. If the man opened the door and caught him staring into nothingness like an idiot again, it would only confirm to the man that Dre was indeed a half-wit. Even now, it seemed likely he had done enough harm to the family name that his parents wouldn't be getting more orders from Lady Mariva anytime soon. He could only imagine how much worse things would get when he had a useless class, a class that would only prove the butler's skepticism correct. Dre trudged back to his cart and started the trek back to his parents' shop. The cart bumped along the uneven dirt path. Light danced across the ground after making its way through the wind-blown branches and sprouting leaves of the canopy above. It was actually quite a beautiful day, but Dre barely noticed it. His fury at the butler had all but dwindled as shame overtook him. Was he really so bad? Was one glance all it took to take his measure and find him wanting? He didn't want to believe it, but he was worried that deep down, he already did. After all, if value came from accomplishments, then he was essentially worthless. In a way, Dre was indebted to the butler. The man had only said aloud what Dre suspected most people thought about him. The common laborer class. It all came back to that. He desperately wanted any other class. Was that even true, though? If he truly wanted any other class, why had he turned down the opportunity to work with Farmer Tillman a few years ago? Why had he refused the job he was offered by the carpenter in Rabin? Why hadn't he shown interest in any of the options that his parents had brought before him? Was he truly just holding out for one of his dream classes? Was he just afraid? Afraid to try something new because he might fail at it? Just like he had at tailoring? If he failed again, then would everyone else think of him? If he failed again, then what would everyone else think of him? More importantly, what would he think of himself? Dre dwelled on his final thought for only a moment before he forced his mind to move on. He had to have done enough to get class options of some sort, right? Maybe he had been wrong earlier and a day was enough time to affect his class choices. He could always try hunting. Many men in the town seemed to really enjoy it as a pastime, even while the others had it as their full-time occupation. If people did it for fun, it couldn't be that bad of a job, right? Or maybe that blacksmithing idea from earlier wasn't actually that crazy. He was quite strong. He could probably convince blacksmith Weston to let him give it a try, or maybe... Dre's thoughts continued to spiral until he slipped into despair, which is where his mind wallowed, until a voice brought him out of his internal musings. "Hey, Dre, what you doing?" a familiar voice said, her tone tinged with playful laughter. Dre looked up to see his best friend, and if he was being totally honest with himself, only friend in the world, removing a pair of gloves as she stood up from where she had been kneeling amidst a small garden. She was tall for the region, but far shorter than Dre. She had wavy brown hair that reached to her upper middle back, a cute nose on an oval face, and a reassuring smile. She wore a simple, well-fitted dress with a white top and brown skirt. It was a practical dress, made out of durable and high-quality material. His mother had spent twice as much on the material she had used for it than she'd asked for in payment. "I'm pretty sure that cart belongs at your parents' shop and not at my house," the girl said as she quirked an eyebrow. "Oh, hey, Asia. Yeah, sorry. You are very right. This needs to go to my parents' shop. I'm not really sure how I got here. I've been stuck in my head all day, and you of all people know how that goes," Dre said, his cheeks flushing slightly. Asia's eyes sparkled with mirth as she gave him a knowing smile. "You want to come in? I could grab you some water. It's a pretty hot day, and I'm sure it feels twice as hot to you while you're lugging that cart around." Dre hesitated. "I probably shouldn't. I really need to get back to the shop, and I'm not that thirsty." Asia frowned, and so Dre continued. "But maybe you could walk with me? Like you used to, before you got busy spending your free time helping Healer Norley." Her face slowly lit up with a smile, and she said, "My parents won't be back for a while, so I think I can afford to take a little break, especially since today is such an important day." Dre tried to smile back, but it felt stiff. Wrong. They left Asia's parents' ramshackle little farmhouse behind and walked together in companionable silence. Dre took the time to simply enjoy her presence. It eased his mind, as being around her always did. After a short while, Asia broke the silence. "Has there been any news of Dexter?" Dre shook his head, still looking forward. "Not that I've heard. I'm sure he's fine, though. This isn't the first time he's gone missing." Asia exhaled a long breath. "I know, but he's never been gone for quite this long. I just worry. Well, we both know that he can be quite odd. I don't know. I just worry. I'm worried too, but what can we do about it? The question just floated there, unanswered. Dre wished he could think of something else to say. Something that would reassure her, but nothing came to him. It was concerning that Dexter had been gone so long. The odd boy often wandered off for a few days at a time, but it had been weeks. Dre had heard his parents speaking about how concerned the carpenter and his wife were. It wasn't like Dre wasn't concerned about him, but he had other things on his mind. Besides, he wouldn't say that he was all that close with Dexter or anything. They had grown up together and had been around each other a lot, but Dre didn't pity the boy's oddities the same way that Asya seemed to. Dre truly hoped that he was okay, though. Guilt began to wash over him as he realized that he hadn't even thought about the boy in over a week. He'd been too caught up in obsessing over his class. Some kind of friend he was. Long after the silence had begun to feel heavy, Asya snapped him out of his self-recrimination with a question. What delivery are you returning from? Did the farm wife Gladys make another order? Dre glanced at her with a slightly guilty look on his face. Actually, it was a dress delivery. For Lady Mariva. Asya looked at Dre, a smirk sitting on her lips. You are aware that my house is almost exactly on the opposite side of Neridny, right? You must have walked right past your parents' shop to get here. I actually took a little detour to avoid it. I didn't want to risk the chance of running into either of them, Dre said, as he felt his cheeks begin to flush. So this is a planned kidnapping, then? You made it seem like more of a spontaneous thing. I just really needed to talk to someone to talk to. You. I've been stuck in my head all day. You know how I can get. Oh, I definitely know how you get, she replied, a secretive smile dancing across her face. But as far as I can tell, you're stuck in your head most every day. Do you maybe want to talk about the fact that it's your class day? Dre didn't answer for long moments, but eventually asked a question that he had asked many times before. A question that would receive an answer that he wanted to hear, but wouldn't believe. Do you think I have any chance of getting a good class? Of course you do, Asya said, her expression growing serious. I am confident you will at least get the overthinker class. She gave a wink, and her expression faded into one of friendly reassurance. But seriously, there's a lot more to you than you realize. You're more than just a delivery boy. You are large and strong, but you're also smart, caring, and such a hard worker. You work twice as hard as anyone our age in the whole of Neridny. Javan got a class even though he's always much less diligent than you. Is hard work enough to get a class? All the common laborers that I know are very hard workers. We both know that my brother wasn't very motivated, but he did always have a knack with herbs, plants, and the like. Do you remember when I got bit by that snake when we were all playing in the woods? Javan found the antidote flower within a few heartbeats. Then you created a poultice in a flash. Those are essentially inborn skills that both of you barely had to nurture. You weren't trained. You didn't need to be. You just remembered things you had seen in passing, and they stuck with you because they resonated with you. I knew my brother wasn't going to get some sort of plant or forestry type class. I know that you are going to get the healer class, or maybe even something better. You both have skills, talents. I don't. I just work hard. Asya shook her head and rolled her eyes at Dre. Well, I've already told you what I think of you, which, it hurts me to say, has had no effect. She added a per usual half under her breath that Dre was pretty sure he wasn't supposed to hear before she continued. So what if I told you that I'm not the only one who thinks that you're going to get a good class? Dre's head snapped up at her comment. Really? Who? Old Man Tom. He told me that he thinks you're going to get something special. Dre rolled his eyes. You think that Old Man Tom is an idiot. I do not, Asya said indignantly, but her fake anger was ruined by an uncontrollable giggle. I may have said that some of his ideas are idiotic, but that implies that some of them aren't. Asya winked, and Dre couldn't help but smile. It quickly turned into a frown, though, before he sighed. I don't know why I'm stressing about this. I've seen countless people arrive at their class day, and none of them seem nearly as nervous as I feel. I guess I just want a class that I can be proud of, one that would make my parents and my friends proud of me. He paused and glanced at Asya, but didn't say the words that he longed to. He needed a class that she would be proud of, a class worthy of her. Asya came to a stop, and Dre followed suit. She turned to look at him, her cheeks a rosy color. Well, I just want you to know that no matter what class you get, I will always be here for you, okay? Dre gave her a strained smile. I know you will. Friends, forever. That's us. Asya sighed and whispered, Yep, that's us. They continued walking in silence for a while, but it was different than before. It was a heavy, awkward thing. Dre had many things that he wished to break the silence with, but he didn't say any of them. Instead, he rambled, Sorry, Asya. I've been going on about me and my troubles this whole time. How are you doing? Your class day is coming up in a couple months. Are you feeling nervous about it? If so, you don't need to be. Ever since you nursed that baby sparrow back to health, I've known that you'd get some sort of healing class. I'm doing fine. You know, I think I should actually head back. I have some chores that I still need to do about the farm. But Dre, try not to worry too much about your class selection. I know I've said it before, but I will say it again. You have a lot more going for you than you seem to think. After saying this, she turned around and walked quickly back the way they had come. Oh, okay, Dre said, only partly surprised by her sudden departure. I'll see you tonight, though, right? You haven't forgotten the promise we made to each other, have you? Asya gave a little wave, but didn't turn around. Dre stood there looking after her for long heartbeats. What had he done this time? Asya was upset with him more and more these days, but Dre wasn't sure what he was doing wrong. He knew that he was keeping her at arm's length, but couldn't she see that it was for her own good? She was probably just tired of having to constantly massage the ego of a worthless piece of dung like himself. She was probably mentally preparing herself to distance herself from him if he didn't get a worthwhile class. He tried to work himself up. He tried to get angry, but he just couldn't manage it. The most annoying thing was that deep down, he completely believed that she would be there for him no matter what. That was the kind of person she was, loyal, trustworthy, and honest. She deserved a better friend, but instead she decided to cast her lot in with him. Dre was desperate not to bring her down with him if he couldn't rise to a decent place in society, as if he had any say in the matter. He knew that he wasn't willing to go to the extremes necessary to drive her away. If she decided to stick with him, he wouldn't be strong enough to deny her. As he walked slowly back towards his parents' shop, his mind continued its mad spiral of self-pity until he was startled out of his thoughts by a shout. Help, please, we need a healer.